So, welcome everyone to the Adult Child Podcast, moving from insanity to serenity. My name is Vandana Atara Ora, and I have a beautiful guest today. She is a speaker that has been with us several times already on our podcast. Her name is Phyllis Leavitt. Hi, Phyllis. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me back. It's always good to see you.
And same here. I love chatting with you, especially about adult children and how adult children, when experiencing years of unhealed childhood trauma, what can happen when they grow up and become adults, and the power dynamics there. And we were talking just a little bit about that before, you and I. um, and how power can either be used appropriately and respectfully, or it could be misused when placed in the hands of adult children who are still playing out their childhood trauma globally. We're
Right.
talking about like world leaders, um, who have little hissy fits and meltdowns, right? And just like uh, behave in a very entitled way, like a spoiled child that never really grew up. So, in the
Mhm.
danger, the potential danger of that for all of us, and how we can together co-create a healthier mindset on this planet. And so, my first question for you, Phyllis, is can you, if it's okay to ask, share a little bit about your background, your childhood history?
Yeah, I mean, and probably it has everything to do with the career that I went into as a psychotherapist and later as an author. I
Mhm.
had sexual abuse in my childhood from a very early age, and
Mhm.
I buried all those memories. And I didn't actually begin to have real memories until I was in my 40s, maybe began in my 30s. Um, and so I was just a mystery to myself. And one of the things that I talk about at length in my book, America in Therapy, is what happens to people when they're hurt by other people and they don't get any help. And sometimes they don't even remember, or they just don't have any help for it because we tend to blame ourselves for bad treatment by other people, especially if you're very young and you don't have any
Yeah.
other frame of reference. You just take it on as negative thoughts, beliefs, and feelings about yourself, which is exactly what I did. And I had no idea what was wrong with me. I just felt like a very, very flawed human being. And I tried my
Mhm.
very best to hide the pain that I walked around in because I had no way to understand it. Um, the
Mhm.
two big outcomes there's many symptoms of abuse, as we know, anxiety, depression, addiction, people pleasing, isolation, aggression. There's many, many, many symptoms that people have when they don't get
Mhm.
help,
Right.
and they don't get rescue. But there's also sort of two main categories that have to do with the power differential that you mentioned. Um,
Yes.
and let's start by saying that no one can hurt you unless they have power over you. They
Mhm.
don't have power over you, they can't do anything to you. And if you're a
Right.
child and you're hurt by an adult, of course you don't have the same power that the adult has, so you're overpowered by them. And the two main outcomes of that power imbalance, when there's abuse or neglect involved, are these two things. Either you really feel helpless because you've been so overpowered, you've given up trying to fight back or save yourself or get away. You've just given up because there hasn't been any escape or there hasn't been anyone who believed you. And the other main symptom on that power perspective are those people who identify with the aggressor and identify with the over-empowering, entitled, I can hurt you, I don't feel any remorse, I can take what I want from you. Um, and so I've identified with the aggressor and I become like the aggressor. So I'm over empowered in a very non-functional, destructive way. So those are the two sides, powerlessness and over-empowerment. Both are
Mhm.
victims of untreated ill at the hands of other people, but left unchecked and, just sort of jumping out to the world, the climate in our country and the climate in the world today, we have more and more people who have become powerless because they've been so overpowered, and they're terrified of having a voice or standing up for themselves because they know what the consequences can be. And we have
Mm-hmm.
more and more people who have identified with the bully on the playground, whether it's in the schoolyard, in the community, or in the government or in business. And those are the people who
Yeah.
have identified with the aggressor. And so you have more people who want to take the power and more people who will give it away, um, because they don't know how to stand up for themselves in a safe way. And this is very frightening for the world situation that we're in, as well as for individuals. I, in my own childhood, was much more on the powerless side. Because I had
Yeah.
no idea of what had happened to me, I just
Mhm.
withdrew, and I tried not to make waves, and I tried not to show, and I tried not to, for anybody to notice me. And of course,
Yeah.
that that hurts our life force, because we all want to be expressed in our unique, creative, loving way in the world. And when we can't, we become symptomatic.
Yes. And it's almost safer to, it is safer to shrink and become invisible
Right.
than to risk punishment,
Right.
and so that's what we learn. And it worked for us then because it kept us alive, but then we're still only like running in survival mode on a very limited life experience. So we're missing out on a lot of joy. So thank you for talking about your childhood a little bit, and that takes a lot of courage and vulnerability, which are qualities that are so admirable, but not so easy to cultivate. Just to talk about, to name whatever we've been through, and to accept it, but also to get help for it and to seek
Right.
therapy.
Right.
Um, and so, what was the main motivating force behind writing your amazing book, America in Therapy, Phyllis?
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, the main motivating force was, I became a therapist out of the therapy that I did for healing my own childhood trauma. I became a therapist, and it was impossible not to see that the extent of abuse and trauma and neglect in families all across America is very rampant today, much more than I think most people would like to know, on a continuum from, mild to life-threatening.
Yeah.
And that people are really suffering, and everybody's doing their best to show up and look okay and survive and thrive. Um,
Mm.
and so I just became intimately involved with what those family dynamics are. What makes up a relatively healthy family, given that none of us is perfect and we all have stuff to learn. But what are some of the qualities of a healthy family, and what are the attributes of an abusive or a neglectful or a highly dysfunctional family? And looking at that, and of course, doing tons of training in that, as well as seeing it on a daily basis in myself and with clients, it was impossible not to see that those same dysfunctional dynamics happen in all systems, large and small, including government. And that in
Yes.
so many ways, our government here in America is operating on abuse family dynamics, and
Ooh,
hurting
I'm
untold.
getting the chills now because you just spoke such truth.
Oh,
Yeah, that's how when I hear something that's so true that people aren't speaking about, that's
right,
being hidden, that could
right.
help the world. And I mean, collectively and individually, I get the chills because I know that, it's just something so important that is not really spoken about at all.
Totally. And that's really why I wrote the book. It's like, this is so in our face, and yet we don't talk about it. What do we all want in our own lives? We want love. We want connection with other people. We want to express our creativity or our joy or our, whatever lights our fire, whether it's love of nature or art or working with animals or being a good mom or whatever it is, we all want safety. Nobody wants their house bombed. Nobody wants their children put in a cage. Nobody wants to be hated because they have a darker color skin or they are a different gender or they
Mm.
love somebody else. None of us want that, but we condone it in the family of America. And we actually enact laws that hurt huge parts of our population, withhold resources. And one of the dynamics in an abusive family, and I just really want to highlight this, is that an abuser always feels justified. They
Always.
have a reason why they hurt you, why they took from you, why they kicked you out, why they hated you, why they blamed you. Is always because you did this or you are that, rather than that they have responsibility for not hurting another human being. And
Yeah.
then the victims so often absorb that. Oh, I had a client just pops into my mind in a group that I did years ago who was talking about horrible physical abuse that he had suffered as a child. Horrible.
Mm. Mm.
And he said, but I deserved it. I was a bad kid.
Oh.
He believed that. And
Mm-hmm.
so many people do. Like, I must be unlovable. I must be unworthy. I must
Mm-hmm.
have done something that brought this on.
Yep.
And that serves the abuse cycle. Is it because if I believe it,
Yeah.
I'm going to try to fix myself rather than say, this is not okay. I need help. I need to get away from here. I need someone to believe me.
And then it gets passed on. We pass it on to our children and grandchildren and so forth from generation to generation, just the same way those abusive patterns and dysfunction were passed on to us.
Right. And we have a history of that in the country, as well as many of us have it in our own families and in our own lives, in our communities. We have a
So could
history.
we talk a little bit more about how you see like maybe a solution to, these little kids, running these governmental systems and I
Right.
mean, with their hands on nuclear weapons, like fingertips on the pulse, and like really, really scary things, affecting global climate and that really may be taking away our human rights as a nation. And I mean, first of all, I think we understand by this point because you're explaining it so well, like these unhealthy, imbalanced power dynamics in the hands of wounded adult
Right.
children. And we
Right.
see it playing out all over the planet in an extreme way.
And it's true.
Um, what and I'm not asking you for like the be all end all, like the
Right.
answer, the solution, and there's not a one solution for everyone, but how do
Right.
you foresee us like moving forward in 2025? Because we're going to be experiencing a lot more imbalanced power dynamics.
Right.
Would you
Right.
agree?
Absolutely, because we're seeing it already.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I mean, so a couple of things I just want to say is that um, it starts with our own healing. It always starts with our own healing because if I can heal some of, and my life has been devoted not only to bringing that to the people that I work with, but to working on that in my own life, finding an appropriate voice, but also learning to listen to other people. That's what we're not doing. We have a right, wrong, win, lose paradigm, good, evil paradigm that is
Yes.
actually killing people. It's killing
Yes.
people. It's killing the planet and it's killing people. Um, so one of the fundamentals of the best therapy is deep listening, deep understanding of the roots of dysfunction. Therapy is not about blame. It's not about,
No.
oh, you did that. You're a horrible person. It's like, oh, you did that and you feel terrible about it. What happened to you that might have set you up to scream at your children or hit people? Or what happened to you that rendered you so powerless that you weren't able to stand up for yourself or your child or whoever? But not, but from a point of view of let's heal this so that you have appropriate power in the world, which means, and which this is, and I think this is why our mental health is not discussed on a national level, because
Hmm.
we're equals. You're worthy, your needs, your values, your opinions, and your voice is just as worthy as mine. It's really easy to fight and wage war. It's really hard to sit down at the table with someone you disagree with, or you felt hurt by, or you're angry with, or you're afraid of, and really have an open conversation where you're both heard and you're both respected. And the goal is to come to some kind of compassionate understanding. And if really not possible to do that, to leave each other alone in peace. And these are some of the fundamentals of the best therapy and mediation, and they're completely missing right now, I think, in the world of government.
So what can we do together? What could we co-create together to change this dynamic?
Yeah, and I think that's really important because for everyone who feels powerless in the face of such overwhelming odds that we seem to be facing in this country and in the world today, but really right here at home, it's
Mhm.
really important to know that everything you do in your own life, whether it's with one person or you're the head of an organization or you teach a classroom of children or you're an artist alone in your studio creating, beauty to share with the world or whatever you want to share with the world. It's really important to know that scale does not matter. If you're loving, if you're kind, if you're open minded, if you're willing to share power with your neighbor and see others as equals, if you're
Yes.
willing to sit at the table when you're upset and really try to work it out with one person or 5,000 people, you are making
Mhm.
a contribution to the world you want to live in. Because I think so many people feel like the sphere of influence that I live in is so small. What difference does it make? But if it's you over here, um, living your values of love and peace and communication and nonviolence in your life, and it's me over here, and it's that person over there, and it's 10 people over there, and it's 500 over there, it does create a consciousness that really wants to be birthed, I believe really wants to be birthed in the human race.
Yes, it's almost like a ripple effect, and that everyone can feel and sense wherever you are in the world. I was gonna just quickly, well, two things. One, it's like, how can we get your book out in a broader scale, in a bigger way, like where more people, the right people who really need it the most, can get their hands on it. That's number one. I was on Facebook the other night, unfortunately, but sometimes that could be an addiction in itself, as we know. It's a great distraction, but I try to limit my time. And there's a woman that I used to work with years ago who was teaching and still is laughter and meditation.
Mm,
And she said, "Oh, I just want to share with everybody that my book is now on Virgin Airlines." And I
wow.
was like, wow, wonder how she did that. Like, and I was thinking, what if your book could be not only in Virgin Airlines, but like in every like governmental institution and, human rights, organizations where people at least would be more open to reading it. I mean, what would it take? That's number one. It's kind of a hypothetical question, but really, if we don't ask, then we'll never know. But like, of course, we know what's going on, what's really going on behind the scenes, and we're going to read people like me are going to read your book, other like healers and coaches and Reiki people. But it's like, how can we get this book into the hands of the right people? Now, the people you say that are, we know hurt people, but the people that are hurting the most, that need this book the most, that are suffering the most and making other people suffer the most, those seem to be the people that are not open or are in denial. Like you mentioned that, like it's not me, it's you. They're caught up in that 3D blame game, shame game, and they feel totally unaccountable and, they're just entitled. Because they were brought up that way. Like, yeah, there are no repercussions, do whatever you want, and you'll always get away with it, even if you commit murder, unfortunately, but it has happened. So
Right.
it's like, what do we do for people like that? They're also, I know, in the category of, I guess in therapy, you would call them. like sociopaths or narcissists or, psychopathic or whatever. We don't want to get into labels too much, but that's the hardest nut to crack. Like, how do we get those people who think like they're perfect? And, how do we get
Mhm.
them to recognize that it's not okay to abuse people, to kill
Right.
people, innocent people? Like, how,
Well,
what do
I
we
would say,
do?
I mean, it's a great question, and there's no easy answer to the question.
Right.
Years and years of experience as a therapist has shown me that far more people who have felt overpowered come to therapy than people who are perpetrators. Um, it's very rare for someone to come to therapy and say, I'm really screaming at my children too much. It happens. Um,
Exactly.
but it's more often that someone who has been overpowered will urge someone who is hurting them to come to therapy if they come at all, or if there's law behind that, that they're court ordered. But I didn't work with the court ordered population. So I can tell
Yeah.
you that it's much harder for people to give up inappropriate power than it is for them to try to find their appropriate power when they've been overpowered. So I don't think that there's a direct answer to what do you do with people who are abusers unless you actually do have some leverage, which is, they're going to go to jail or there's a court order or
Consequences.
consequences and I've seen like on a much less drastic level, I've seen partners say to an abusive alcoholic partner, you either get sober or we're getting a divorce. And sometimes that works. Sometimes there's enough motivation. A person doesn't want to lose their family or their job or their standing or something. And the pain of the consequence is a motivation to get help and uncover the hurt part of them that has, resulted in them identifying with the aggressor. But on a larger scale, I think it probably is going to take more people finding their appropriate power, not like backlash, not like I'm going to get you now because you got me, which is too often what happens. And we
Yeah.
definitely see this on an international level that a whole people has been overpowered, and then they become the abusers themselves once they power.
Yes, absolutely.
And
It's
these are
ironic.
psychological, right?
It's so ironic, right? But it seems counterintuitive, but it actually happens all the time. So
All the
you were saying what we can
Well, I
do
was
in a
just going
larger
to say that
scale?
I think it's going to take enough people to do enough healing and be willing to have a voice and say, I mean, I'll tell you, there's a part of me that's scared that I wrote this book.
Hmm.
It didn't stop me from writing it. It won't stop me from talking about it. But I have
Mm-hmm.
fear that I'm challenging the status quo of these very non-functional, dysfunctional, highly abusive systems we live in. I'm not a big name, so nobody's coming after me today.
Yeah, I think
But
you'll be fine, right?
but you know what I'm saying? It's like a
Yes,
lot.
I do, exactly, because we're being monitored and censored like more and more. Um, so
And
we don't know, like, yeah,
we're talking about love and peace.
yeah,
And somehow that's going to be weaponized against many people.
and
And it already
healing.
has. It already has. Peaceful
Uh,
demonstrators being shot with rubber bullets and tear gassed and kettled and all these horrible things, arrested um, for exercising a constitutional right to peaceful demonstration.
mhm, mhm,
So I think we have to be brave.
mhm.
If that's your calling, not everybody's called to speak out. Maybe it's just you want to help children, or you want to work with animals, or you want to do something for the environment. I would just say to everybody, do your part. Even if
Yes,
you think it's a drop in the ocean, do it because your drop in the ocean and mine can become a wave, like we're saying. But
yes,
I think we have to have some courage to say, not from a place of aggression and not from a
right,
place of hostility, that
right.
these abusive kinds of institutions are dangerous, but from a place of like, let's heal. Let's come back to the table. Let's create the world we all want to live in. Because one of the things that I think the best psychology, and which I really try to point out in my book, is that when people are not safe, actually, none of us are safe. And I
Right,
think we
exactly.
don't want to make that connection. How did the 15-year-old girl want to go shoot up her school? I don't know that story yet, but what happened to her? What happened to the Uvalde shooter? Do we actually really want to look into the social climate, the family climate, the social climate, the gender climate, the racial climate, the economic climate that produces more and more people who are so disconnected from their humanity that they want to die and they want to take people out with them? That's on
Mm,
us as the family of America, not as a blame, but as, and I always say it this way, and you've probably heard me say this before. If a
mhm,
car engine is built in a faulty way and it blows up, we'd be the first ones to bring in the car engine experts to rebuild the engine so that that doesn't happen again. When a person blows up, we want to kill them and put them in jail. There's something so
mm,
disconnected in the way we
mm.
view our own brothers and sisters here. Um, and of course, it's scary if someone
Yeah,
goes into a school and shoots up a school, and you do want them to get stopped. But can we prevent it by changing the dynamics in the family of America and in our homes? We can.
yes.
We can.
That's beautiful, Phyllis. I really want to thank you for being on this on the Adult Child podcast with me today. There's so much more that we can dive into, and I'd love to have you back on the show again. Is there anything else that you wanted to share? Any, um, any affirmations or anything that, people can do just to feel a little bit more empowered themselves?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would just say, because maybe I'm feeling it myself right now, is don't give up
Yeah,
hope. Come back to your essential self. If you don't get the reception from other people that you wish, if you don't feel heard, if you don't really feel seen in your beautiful essence, and you don't know how to lift off some of the negative projections that might be coming your way, which many of us receive, um, don't give up hope. Your essential self is just as beautiful and lovable and needed as everybody else's. And so, seek out the real support and put some protection around yourself if you can. I don't mean a wall of isolation, but I mean some psychological, emotional protection around yourself. You don't have to engage with someone who just wants to shout you down. Look for the places where you are actually wanted, where you might have an impact, where there's an opening. Um, because that's what I try to do. Um, if
yeah,
that Yeah.
absolutely. That's perfect advice. And also find your support system, find your extended soul family.
Yeah.
And don't and try not to isolate, and there's always a way to to protect yourself in toxic relationships, and you're not a victim. You have more power than you were ever told that you ever had, and so we all have that. But I mean, it's just really the world that we're living in now, Phyllis. It's just, it's really easy to sort of get depressed and worried and in fear and anxiety. And I mean, that's of course why we all need therapy, no matter, I mean, just to process and to get it out of our system, to vent, and to have somebody in front of us like you, who is just like so compassionate and understanding, but also to have our voices heard,
Yeah.
and not to, and not to submit to, being censored or dumbed down or hushed,
Yeah,
whatever, like not to give in to the fear. Right. And yeah.
absolutely. And I would say we're all born with a beautiful essential self that is pure and loving. And to the extent that we become dysfunctional ourselves, it's a result of dysfunctional human dynamics, unless, you're born with some biochemical imbalance. But for most of us, we're born just beautiful, essential human beings. And
Yeah.
one of the greatest gifts that one person can give another is to see them that way. I know that the first time I felt seen as my most essential self by another human being, it changed my life. And you don't have to
Mm,
be a therapist to do that. We can give that to each other with just patience and loving kindness and an open mind and an open heart.
absolutely. So thank you again. I'm so happy that you were able to find time to come back on the show and to empower and inspire whoever is meant to hear you and me, and that our voices are stronger together.
So
So,
thank you
and
for
thank
having.
you. And Phyllis, where can people find your book? And would you like to share some links to your,
Yeah.
your website or articles you've written or anything else?
Yeah. Oh, please go to my website. It's my name, phyllisleavitt.com, and you can probably see the spelling on the book, but it's PHYLLISLEAVITT. You can buy my book off my website. It's available from all major booksellers, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million. I don't even know all the different places where it is. But you can, Goodreads, you can buy it anywhere. I'd love it if you left a review. If you visit my website, and you just sign in, to contact me.